Careless. They're ushered down a wide hallway, hundreds of them, like a giant roaming colony of ants. The walls are a faded kind of beige. It reminds Tom of the tobacco-stained ceiling in Grandma's living room. Stern old faces scan them as they move. It's impossible not to have the sense that they've done something wrong, but don't know what it is. Original sin. It is creepily quiet considering the volume of bodies. Rubber soles squeak on the slick floor and echo along the corridor. Various cliques within the horde communicate in excited hushed tones, and Tom watches them with a feeling of longing. Every now and then they receive an admonishing hiss from an adult on the sidelines. The starchy collar of his new shirt rubs against the back of his neck. He's never thought himself short, but as he struggles to glimpse what is ahead of him, he is now reconsidering this. In his hand is a crumpled A4 page. Upon approaching the hall, he hears the grim giant shouting, "A's to the left! B's to the right!" He glances at his piece of paper. Registering the B in 7B3, he veers right. The dingy hall is enormous, lit by a cold fluorescence. He's bad at judging numbers. On the half-full B side are dozens of rows of green plastic chairs, anywhere from 200 to 300. Scattered beside the rows are teachers holding A4 pages like his, denoting their own form group. The lack of organisation is troubling. 7B4 is held aloft beside the first row, but the next one down is 7B2. For a second, he questions whether his designation exists, and this momentarily terrifies him. Is he in the wrong place? Then he spots it. A squat bald man in a brown corduroy blazer emerges between 7B1 and 7B5, which are both raised by longer arms. His A4 page has the same code as Tom's. "Hold them up!" he hears him yell at no one in particular. Tom obliges, and a few seconds later they lock eyes and the teacher beckons him on. Not in a joyful or welcoming manner. Tom feels like the last player to be picked in a team game. Perhaps this observation is unfair. The man is simply trying to assemble his group as quickly as possible. The vague aroma of mint on his breath cannot mask the smell of cigarettes. He gesticulates. "All the way to the bottom! Don't leave a gap!" Tom does as asked, taking off his backpack before finding his seat halfway down the second row, smiling at the boy to his left, who responds with a hostile glare. When he turns away, Tom notices the glint of a gold stud in his left earlobe. Uncertain murmuring ripples throughout the hall in waves, quelled by the shushes of paper-wielding wardens. A minute later, a hard-faced girl claims the seat to Tom's right. Her eyes are fixed ahead and her expression is of stoic acceptance. Though her blazer and skirt are old, neither look like they've ever seen an iron. Another 10 minutes pass before the hall is filled. Tom scans his vicinity, contemplating that these are the faces he will become most familiar with over the next few years. Their headmistress has a shrill voice. There's a whistle of feedback when she speaks into a microphone. From his distance of 40 or so meters, he can discern dark circles around her eyes. Her opening welcome is brief and insincere, and the next utterance concerns knives, warning that they are prohibited on site. Smoking is also prohibited, as is drug use. It strikes Tom as odd that these are her opening statements to a hall of 11-year-olds. He's preoccupied with the sense that everyone here is a stranger. No one from his primary school has made it into the hall. He curses his mother for not waiting to move until they'd secured his previous catchment area, then realises that he's directing his anger at the wrong parent. When his section eventually drifts into his form room, the sheer number of bodies is alarming. The average class size in the UK is apparently 30. He counts 47 names at registration. In ICT there are 56. The lowest number is 41, Spanish. It's astonishing to see how quickly a hierarchy is established, like it was predetermined. The cooler kids instantly recognise one another. They all seem to share the same brand of backpacks and footwear, not to mention a level of bravado and keen awareness of slang. Below this apex are children similarly garbed, but demurer and more submissive. Though Tom would happily fall into this group, he quickly learns that his Nike backpack and new shoes are nullified by his personality. The lad with the gold stud introduces himself as Seb, and immediately asks if he likes boys. Tom misreads the question and answers in the affirmative. He has little first-hand experience with homophobia. He knows that his uncle is gay, and everyone in his family is perfectly accepting, even somewhat proud of the fact. But he now finds himself arguing against Seb's accusations, which seems like an acknowledgement that being gay is wrong. Despite feeling like he's betrayed his Uncle Chris, sadly, he's more preoccupied with being denigrated for belonging to a group he's 99% certain he does not belong to. Vehemently denying the charge only seems to exacerbate things. Seb incites a crude chant before the tutor screams for silence in the room. Tom soon learns that taking an active involvement in lessons is even more provocative than being attracted to the same sex, and that he's been assigned to the lowest social group. When his history teacher asks if anyone can define the term bias, it does not seem to matter that Tom's explanation is well articulated, as attested by the teacher. He's apparently committed a cardinal sin. Someone from an adjacent desk calls him a brown nose, and then other vulgar things that only he can hear. Though the teacher does not defend Tom, he cannot hold this against her. She seems almost as terrified of his classmates as he is. When Tom leaves history, the straps of his backpack are yanked off his shoulders. The action is so forcible that he feels lucky to have remained on his feet. He turns to see the boy who called him a brown nose now holding his bag, and is informed that claiming it back risks a cut from the blade in his pocket. While Tom is relatively confident that the boy is not carrying a knife, his fierce, unblinking eyes dissuade him from finding out for certain. This is the last he ever sees of the Nike bag, or any of his original workbooks and stationery. Tom soon observes that middle group children can engage in lessons without assault, and the smart ones receive his silent admiration. In an attempt to make friends, and to advance to this group, he tells Lindsay Watts that he likes the sketch she drew in art. She smiles until her two friends arrive, then calls Tom a loser, and the three of them walk off laughing. In maths, he helps George O'Hare with a particularly hard equation. George is grateful at the time, but pretends not to see him later at lunch. Tom is chased home at the end of most days. It evokes an image of the frightened stray cat his old neighbour's son used to terrorise. He runs in fear of what might happen if he's caught. Then he runs because he knows what does. When his mum asks him what happened to his bag, he simply says that he lost it. He's grounded for 2 weeks, but all of his friends are now too far away to call on, and it seems a small price to pay to avoid the hassle she would inevitably create for him at school. His teachers are collectively enraged by the idea of handing him new blank workbooks. One of them calls him a careless idiot. All resources are apparently a priceless commodity. He's unsure whether it's ignorance or narcissism that prompts him to continue his active participation in lessons for the next few months. But he receives A's in every piece of work he's assigned, which incites regular verbal attacks. While he learns to treat it like white noise, he's unable to do this with the physical attacks. Most notable so far is the blow to his knee from Connor Tipley with a broken fence post, for apparently making the boy feel stupid in geography. Admittedly, Tom's comment that he didn't need his help did not diffuse the situation. Tom's knee swells to the size of a melon, and he's forced to hobble about on it for a week, which sadly provides his schoolmates with more ammunition. Invitations for fights with other boys in his year and the year above are extended regularly. And although Tom never RSVPs, the hosts are very insistent. By the Easter holidays, he's participated in half a dozen of such brawls, but feels they are far too one-sided for him to claim bragging rights. During the summer holidays, his mum demands that he removes the filthy sweatband he's been wearing for a month. She is horrified by the 5 razor-bladed lines hidden underneath, even after he tries to assure her that they're probably not even deep enough to scar. When she refuses to let the observation go, Tom is forced to tell her that the action stemmed from his fear that the lessons are becoming too difficult. Though, if his stolen report cards ever made it home, she would immediately know that this is nonsense. Thinking of the real reason, he starts to cry, and she strokes his head, insisting that he should try and apply himself. He finds he cries a lot, usually in private. After a lonely 6-week summer break, secretly reading things on the internet about bravely facing adversity, Tom vows to return to the comprehensive with a more resilient attitude. He soon discovers that this is much easier in theory than in practice, however, as attested by a quick yet decisive beating he endures at lunchtime on day 2. It's remarkable to him that a kick to the stomach can expel all of the air from the lungs. A week later, Tom faces Connor Tipley in the boys' toilets, and an intense aversion to having his head submerged in the yellowish basin of Connor's choosing spurs Tom to punch him in the mouth. Though both boys end up in detention the following afternoon, Connor now nods at Tom in the corridor, occasionally with a genuine smile. Unfortunately, not all of his peers are so easy to placate. For 3 RE lessons in a row, Tamara Wilde finds a way to decorate his hair with chewing gum, and Tom learns that the only way to remedy this is with a pair of scissors and 2 mirrors, 1 hand in 1 bathroom. By the end of the week, the back of Tom's head resembles a hedge attended to by a blind groundskeeper. Seb with the gold stud, who now refers to Tom as Queer Brain, is a relentless nuisance. When the temperature rises late spring, and the non-air-conditioned classrooms force the removal of blazers, Seb entertains himself by using a fountain pen to transform the back of Tom's white shirt into an unimaginative Jackson Pollock. In a pre-prandial state of annoyance, Tom loses his senses and decides to confront the much larger boy. Perhaps inspired by their encounter on the very first day, he decides to loudly question why Seb is so obsessed with him, heavily insinuating that there must be an element of attraction involved. Initially, he feels bad for resorting to this tack. Sorry, Uncle Chris. But he does manage to delineate that there is nothing wrong with being gay, and that any offence incurred clearly derives from Seb's own insecurity and innate bigotry. The illusion Tom knows is like kryptonite to his male peers, and he receives the reaction he was half expecting. Overwhelming flustered denial from Seb, which, as Tom recalls, only exacerbates things, and a surprising but welcome profusion of jeers and name-calling from Seb's own friends. Unlike Connor Tipley, Seb doesn't nod warmly at Tom in the corridors after the incident. In fact, he now seems to focus all of his energy on pretending that Tom doesn't exist. Unfortunately, there are far more formidable characters in the school than Seb and Connor Tipley, and the verbal and physical assaults are not thwarted by a mere emergence of courage. Tom is almost ashamed to admit it, but the real change occurs when his active involvement in lessons diminishes. Instead of raising his hand and offering his insight to once tempting questions, he starts to belittle those who do. Before long, this earns him several new friends and far more detentions. Curiously, he no longer feels an unspoken fellowship with the students who bravely engage. He now resents them, and as they begin to overtake him in lessons, he starts to surpass them in social status. He finds that gaining the respect of cooler students is intoxicating. Instead of placing gum in his hair, Tamara now remarks on it flatteringly. He has been promoted to the highest group. Here, any act of defying authority, no matter how banal, boosts his popularity. Now that Tom's report cards are no longer favourable, they are also no longer being stolen, and his mother occasionally finds them. While the old incident with the razor blade stops her from coming down too hard on him at first, at parents' evening, she's horrified to learn that his grades have only taken a significant nosedive in the last year. Tom is sitting his GCSEs soon. In maths, his teacher threatens demotion to a lower set, where the highest achievable grade is a C. "I don't care," Tom says when the teacher flings the substandard coursework back at the student. "This is your last chance," he says. "Try harder." Tom hesitates. He knows he can do better. The effort would be marginal. He looks to his grinning friends in the corner. Then back to the teacher, the same one who once called him a careless idiot. He pulls out a lighter from his pocket, applying it to the corner of the workbook. Within seconds, it's ablaze. Alone later, Tom awaits a decision from the head teacher. Isolated from his smiling audience, he realizes that their approval now counts for nothing. Thank you very much for making it all the way to the end of the video. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and a like and a share would also be much appreciated.